We had always felt safe in our home, nestled in a quiet, suburban neighborhood where the biggest worry was forgetting to lock the front door at night. The kids played in the yard without a care, and we slept soundly, knowing nothing could ever disrupt our peace. But that was before everything changed. At first, it was just a feeling, an inexplicable sense that something was off. I'd find myself glancing over my shoulder, sure that someone was watching me, but there was never anyone there. Objects started to move on their own, just small things, like the TV remote being in a different spot or a door left ajar when I was sure I'd closed it. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was the kids or my own forgetfulness. But the unease grew stronger with each passing day. There were nights when I'd wake up suddenly, my heart racing, as if I'd just escaped from a nightmare. I'd lie there, listening to the silence, but then I'd hear it, faint creaks in the hallway, like someone walking slowly, deliberately. I wanted to believe it was just the house settling, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was like the air in the house had changed, growing heavier, darker. And with every breath I took, I felt it pressing down on me, suffocating me with a fear I couldn't quite understand. We thought it was just our imagination, that it would pass. But we were wrong. So very wrong. The invasion was sudden, like a nightmare unfolding in slow motion. I remember the moment the door was forced open, the wood splintering with a sickening crack. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the house, growing louder with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized this wasn't just a break-in, there was something else, something darker, in our home. I grabbed my children, my hands trembling, and rushed to the bedroom. I could barely think, my only instinct to protect them. Slamming the door shut, I locked it, hoping it would keep whatever was out there at bay. But the noises, they were everywhere, surrounding us, closing in. The footsteps weren't just heavy, they were deliberate, as if the intruder knew exactly where we were hiding. And then, there were whispers, low, insidious, and filled with a malevolence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a robbery. This was something much, much worse. The air grew colder, and I could feel a presence, something evil, lurking just beyond the door. The terror reached a fever pitch as the door to our bedroom began to rattle, the force behind it growing stronger with each passing moment. But when it finally burst open, no one was there, no human figure, at least. Instead, the room filled with an oppressive darkness, a suffocating presence that seemed to seep into every corner of the room. Then, I saw it, something I can never unsee. My husband, who had been frantically trying to protect us, suddenly stopped. His body went rigid, and for a moment, it was as if time stood still. But then, his eyes, they went black. Not just dark, but an abyssal void that seemed to swallow a light. His face twisted into an expression I didn't recognize, something cruel and sinister. A sound escaped his lips, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was a guttural, inhuman growl that sent chills down my spine. I could barely comprehend what I was seeing. This was no longer the man I married. He was gone, consumed by something malevolent, something that had forced its way into our home and now into his very soul. I tried to reach him, calling his name, pleading for him to come back to us, but the thing that had taken hold of him only grinned with a twisted, mocking smile. My husband was no longer himself. He had become the puppet of a monstrous entity, and the person I loved was trapped somewhere deep within, unable to break free. The room was a chaotic blur of movement and desperate cries. My children clung to me, their terrified sobs echoing in my ears as we backed away from the man who was once my husband. He advanced on us with a slow, deliberate pace, his blackened eyes fixed on us with a predatory gaze. Every step he took seemed to drain the warmth from the air, leaving behind a chilling cold that gnawed at our bones. I knew we had to fight, to do something, anything, to save him and protect ourselves. My mind raced, grasping at fragments of stories, old tales of exorcisms, anything that might hold a shred of truth. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a salt shaker from the kitchen, and hurled it at him, the grains spilling across the floor. I prayed, muttering frantic, jumbled words as I made a circle around us, hoping against hope that it would keep the demon at bay. But it just laughed. My husband's voice, twisted and warped, now a mocking echo of the man he once was. It advanced, unaffected by our desperate efforts. We tried everything, holding crosses, reciting prayers through tears, even throwing holy water, but nothing stopped it. If anything, each attempt only seemed to feed the dark entity, making it stronger, more terrifying. The room felt like it was closing in on us, the walls bending under the weight of the malevolent force. My children's screams grew louder, their terror piercing my heart, but I couldn't give up. I couldn't let it take him completely. I clutched a Bible to my chest, my hand shaking as I opened it and began to read aloud, my voice trembling with fear. The words caught in my throat as the thing inside my husband snarled, lunging at us with a speed that defied human limits. I barely managed to dodge, shielding my children as we scrambled to the other side of the room. The air was thick with despair, our every effort seeming futile. The entity's presence was overwhelming, an oppressive force that crushed hope with every breath we took. We're losing him, I thought, panic rising in my chest like a tidal wave. It was a battle we couldn't win, a nightmare that wouldn't end, and I could feel the last threads of our sanity slipping away. We stumbled out of the house, bloodied and broken, our breaths coming in ragged gasps as we fled into the night. The once comforting walls of our home now stood as a silhouette of horror behind us, shrouded in darkness. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it whispers of a terror we couldn't escape. My children were sobbing, their faces streaked with tears and dirt, their eyes wide with fear that mirrored my own. We had escaped, or so we thought. The cold night air bit at our skin, but it was nothing compared to the icy dread that clung to our souls. We didn't look back, we couldn't. All that mattered was getting as far away as possible. But no matter how far we ran, the feeling of something following us, something lurking in the shadows, refused to leave. It wasn't until we reached the safety of a neighbor's house that we dared to stop. We collapsed on their porch, gasping for air, clutching each other as if letting go would mean losing everything. But as I tried to catch my breath, a new terror gripped my heart. My husband, he was with us, but something was wrong. He was too quiet, too still. I turned to look at him, my heart pounding in my chest, and the world seemed to tilt beneath me. His eyes, they were the same black voids, empty and cold, staring back at me with an unnatural calm. My breath hitched, and I felt the blood drain from my face. He wasn't free. The demon hadn't left him. It was still there, hiding behind those eyes, waiting. Panic surged through me, my mind racing with the horrifying realization that we hadn't escaped at all. We had brought it with us. The entity had latched onto him, or maybe even one of us. It was still there, watching, biding its time. In that moment, I knew the truth. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. The darkness had followed us, seeped into our lives, and there was no escaping it. Every night since, I've seen those black eyes staring back at me in the mirror, felt the cold breath of the entity on the back of my neck. It's still here, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. And I know, deep down, that one day it will.